Oftentimes, one can wonder what is the basis of a technological innovation or creation, and it's quite difficult to find a common baselines between each facet of all the technology out there. That said, if we are to generalize this origin as much as theoretically possible, then the commonality among the motivation for creating and innovating technology is conflict. Your mental image of the word conflict may have a stronger or softer connotation than anybody else's. This spectrum of extremity in how this word can be used is intentional to a wide variety of what technology refers to. Basically, there is a conflict among bread being untoasted as much as there is a conflict among nations across the globe. That being said, as the topic of conflicts covers much more severe and consequential applications, the technology used to address them often has much more ethical implications. In Technology and Society, Robert McGinn covers this topic matter directly, focusing on the multitude of ways ethical conflicts can be approached. From an arguably negative point of view, ethical conflicts can be construed from parties who aren't neutral, creating pseudo facts and factoids, although another significant approach is in identifying which parties have a legitimate stake in the outcome of the dispute, or in smaller words, which parties are affected. McGinn's third consideration is understanding the ways certain parties are conceptualizing their arguments and the ethical implications of how they've been conceptualized. Lastly, he talks about the ways in which ethical arguments typically incorporate distinct kinds of decision making theories and arguments which portray the rightness and wrongness of something based on the belief, attempting to account for every facet of life. One of these beliefs is utilitarianism, which believes that an action or policy is right if it's likely to produce at least a great surplus of good over bad consequences, or at least more above any alternative option. On the less extreme end of the spectrum of conflicts, at least from a perspective only accounting for emotions and controversy, comes some of the first iterations of how technology has addressed conflicts, some of which reach as far back in time as to be identified as historic. One of these artifacts of great technological significance was the astrolabe. This device originated in Egypt and held a function of identifying times, dates, and constellations, and the positions of the sun and the moon. Now, I'm using the word identified, but the more accurate depiction of how this device was used would be calculated. This device, or at least its ship compatible iteration known as Mariner's astrolabe, was most appropriately used on sailing the sea, being just as integral to a successful trip as a compass. Its function was to measure the angle between the horizon and a celestial body in the sky, the measurements of which would assist in navigation. Um, we've covered the many approaches to ethical conflicts in technology, as well as an iconic technological artifact that was like a direct response to more conventional worldly conflicts. But what about conflicts of information persisting between each passing century? Writing is a form of technology that was capable of solidifying learned information in a way that was easily accessible for others to learn from, where in an immediate sense, or like they could immediately learn it versus um, basically orally communicated stories, which would be considered to have like lost some value over time. And the reason this is like because of this written technology. The older generation, who were previously the only ones of capable of passing on this wisdom, don't hold this exclusive right anymore. It's argued that despite the many goods this invention created, it also held many conflicts that were formed from what it took away, mainly in the form of like less human touch in how a story or event is communicated. It's reasonable to assume that written texts are often much easier to misinterpret or not properly convey the gravity of a topic. Overall, conflict has motivated the birth and expansion of technology time and time again, and will continue to do so as long as there's a need or want for it. It's important to recognize what the growth of technology gave us as well as what it took away from us, as often the latter isn't immediately visible to the naked eye.